Good morning, folks. Welcome back to the shop here at Markelly Farm. We have a beautiful day in store, and I'm really excited, and there's a reason why. Now we've got all our have-to-dos pretty much caught up, so that means we can get back on Cubby here. If you remember, we left off, we put this rear platform back together. I still need to pull the drawbar off and the drawbar brackets because we had jack stands underneath here and we couldn't paint very well underneath the final drives. So we'll pull that off so we can get that painted. And then we're going to start pulling sheet metal off the front so we can get at the motor a lot better. The gas tank is spotless, so we don't have to worry about that, but that's going to come off with the hood. It's one piece. The lights are going to come off, and then once we get all the sheet metal stripped off, we can start seeing if this motor is going to pop off for us. The motor is free. I'll turn the hand crank here, and you can see that we are free. We got a little compression, so that's good. So hopefully with any luck, we're going to see if this baby runs today. The first thing I'm going to do is I got a seat cover for this old seat. This old seat was all blowed out, had all the material and everything missing from it. In fact, it's even got some holes rusted in it, but we put a coat of paint on it because it's a real good sturdy seat pan yet. So we got a cover for that. There's our seat cover. Just got a drawstring that you tighten up underneath the lip. Provides a little cush for your tush. So I got another little item I got at an auction here a while back. We got a little antique wheel spinner. Pretty cool. We'll clean all this up and put a coat of varnish on that so that looks good when we redo the steering wheel a little bit. So I think we're clear now. We're going to start pulling sheet metal off this thing. We'll take the old mason jar off, and our air breather cap comes off of here. This comes off of the fuel tank. We'll take our radiator cap off. We have to undo our lights here because they go through. The wiring goes through, so the light's got to be disconnected. And then we'll take the screws loose that we need to take loose, and this tank and hood will come off together. Now, a lot of these old tractors sit around out in the field, and there's no cover on the exhaust pipe. This had the exhaust pipe on it with this up on top. But you've got to make sure this is covered, because even though there's a weep hole down here in the manifold, if it rains hard and water gets down in here, you're going to get your cylinders all rusting and everything, and your valves rusting. It's going to cause a huge problem. We were very fortunate that this thing, somebody was smart enough to cover the exhaust pipe up, so our motor's still free, and we're probably not going to have a lot of issues with it. We've got our air intake cap off. We ran across this at Junk Jaunt. We thought we got a heck of a bargain. It's an old pre-cleaner that goes on these pipes, but we figured out this is for a bigger tractor, but they would just come out on over here or however you had them, and then these were set up so a little mason jar would screw right onto here, and as the air went up in this kind of venturi section up in here, your particulates would fall into this jar and kind of pre-clean the air before it goes down into your intake. But I'm going to give this one to my buddy Matt because he's got bigger tractors that this will fit on. Got both of our lights disconnected, and we have our wires shoved back through the cowling here so they won't hang up. These lights only had one wire going to them because the ground or the power or whatever, because these are negative ground tractors, is grounded through metal here. So it uses the metal as a contact, so you only need one wire to your light. These are most likely 6-volt lights because these old tractors were 6-volt systems. I haven't seen up in here whether it's got a generator or alternator, but I'm assuming this did not get converted and it's still 6-volt. So we've got some other screws to take loose back here before this hood's ready to come off. I don't know if they're meant for it, but there's little holes right here where you can shove the hose on your lubricating can and get to the back sides of these bolts. So that's pretty handy. There's one on both sides. So we've got some lubricant screwed in there, and we're working the bolts back and forth to get them out. Got our two front bolts out. They were pretty crusty, but they did come out. Different lengths for some reason. We'll see if that's for a purpose. If not, we'll either get new bolts or clean those up, and we'll at least make a match. So our front of our hood is loose. So now we just got to work on those screws in the back. Now, if you were this many years old before you knew this, I have a little stubby ratchet handle here and a 7/8 deep socket. If you need a little more torque on a screw that you're doing, these handles fit perfectly into a 7/8 socket. You can get a little more oomph on your screwdriver. Now, if you have a different head of screwdriver or a different handle, you can also just use a small crescent wrench or adjustable end wrench on the end of your screwdriver blade. Some of your nicer, newer screwdrivers will actually have a hex portion right here where you can put a little end wrench on, but we don't have any of those. Just work that screw back and forth, loosen it up a little bit before you try to take it all the way out. Might come out now. You got to make sure you're using the right size head of screwdriver too, because the head's too small. It'll want to strip out the top of your screw head. Try to stay in the center of your screw, and it should eventually come out. We've got that penetrating oil there on the back side too, so it's coming now. Not a problem. There we go. Now that we have all our bolts loose on the hood, we need to get in here and we need to take our fuel line loose from our sediment bowl. Make sure you have your petcock turned off so you're not draining a bunch of fuel out of your tank, or if you can siphon as much out of your tank as you can ahead of time, and then make sure that's off before you disconnect that. The fitting under the gas tank is really hard to get to, so I took the fitting loose from the carburetor. It's got a hard line here. That should lift right off with the tank. Now our wiring harness has got a metal clip here on the bottom of the gas tank. You have to bend that out to get your harness loose. There's another one right here, and then we should be able to lift off. There you go. You can get a better idea of what the bottom of the hood looks like. Now all your screw holes are supposed to have nuts welded on the back here. We're going to run all these nuts with a tap. Make sure they're open. We're missing a nut here, so we'll straighten this tab out here with a hammer, and then we'll put a nut back here and weld that nut on there. There's your tabs that hold your wiring harness. Here's your fuel line that you can get out a lot easier now. We may go to a rubber hose fuel line, which is not original, but it's a lot easier to deal with, and you can put a fuel filter in line. And then you should have nuts here for your side cowling that attaches there. So we'll probably pull our headlights off later, because we'll probably paint all this separately. We probably need to go through these headlights. But that's what she looks like. And now we have loads of room to get in here. Still got a 6-volt generator, so we're still a 6-volt system. If there was a 12-volt alternator here, you would be able to tell that the conversion's been done. So we got good access to our motor now. Looks like we got some kind of leaking going on here I'm hoping it's just from the oil bath air filter here. There's an oil bath there on the bottom. But all in all, it didn't look like there was a lot of leaks on this tractor. All this is from my PB blaster that I put in there. We're going to have to see if the radiator holds fluid. We don't know what's in there. And then some of our linkages to our carburetor need to be freed up. This is the starter linkage here. This is the throttle linkage. It needs to be freed up. I've been told that you just work that lever in there on the governor with a pair of pliers, it'll get moving. But we've already sprayed it down with some penetrating oil. We've got everything on the carburetor sprayed down. So it won't be long, we'll be able to see if this thing has spark when we turn it over. It looks like somebody's got some weird conglomerations going on over here, stuff mounted where it's not necessarily supposed to be mounted. And then we cut the battery cable short when we were taking everything apart because we're going to put new battery leads on it. So we'll put a new battery lead on our starter when we get ready to crank this thing over. This is all your hydraulic unit here. Your hydraulic pump is up front, right up here. And then you got lines going back to your hydraulic control unit. You have a little ram in here that rotates this rod. And then there's a big rod that connects back here to a hinge that bolts right here so you can move stuff. I think we're going to delete that. We may even delete this because this just bolts right down here on top of the motor. And then we'll just make a cover to go over where the hydraulic pump was. And that'll open all this up. I'm contemplating moving the battery up here, but I don't know if there's room underneath the fuel tank. Otherwise, we'll leave the battery where it's at. But we're contemplating pulling this off and just leaving this off because this is going to be a parade tractor. It's all it's ever going to do for us. Somebody down the line may be upset that I took that stuff off, but oh well. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to see if our radiator is watertight. We're just going to put regular water in here. I don't want to use antifreeze because if it is got a bad leak somewhere, I don't want to waste all that money putting antifreeze in here. But if it does hold water, we will make sure to drain it back out because we don't want to go through a freeze and crack anything down here. Hopefully that's not already happened. Okay, we filled it clear to the top, and it appears the only leak we have is out of our drain plug here that appears to be just a bolt and is not the correct thing to go in that hole. So that's probably why it's leaking. So we'll get this drain back out of here and figure out what we need to do and what we need to get to put in that drain. But everything else is pretty sealed up. This little bit of water here is what I overfilled with, but we don't appear to have any leaks anywhere else, and that's good news. Now we are missing a metal plate that goes right here. Well, it's missing from here, but I have it. It was in the toolbox on this tractor, so I don't know why it wasn't placed back in here. It just serves as a stiffener to hold this flange down for the radiator. But we don't seem to be leaking here. This is water I spilled. But I'd like to get that plate put back on there. I don't really want to pull the whole radiator out and reseal it. We don't need to. I'm not in the habit of trying to solve problems I don't have. This was the bolt that was in there. Appears to be either 1/2 inch or 5/8 bolt, but it was very loose, so I'm sure that's why it was leaking. But we need to figure out what goes in there. I doubt if it's a bolt. It should be some kind of tapered thread, something or other, unless it's made to seal on this surface, maybe with an O-ring or something. But we'll go to Steiner Tractors and see what we're supposed to have for this Cub. Now it appears just to be a 3/8 pipe plug, so I don't need to order that from anybody special. I can just get that at my hardware store. I may even have one here in my my supply, so we'll check real quick. If not, we'll pick it up next time we're in town. So now I want to hook the battery up to the starter. We'll see if the starter's gonna spin. So looking through my stash, I don't have a 3/8 plug, but I have a 3/8 close nipple. So that's the correct size, but you can see how the threads differ. So hopefully they didn't try to jam this bolt too far in there. I don't think they did because it was fairly loose. But I did thread that coupler, that nipple, into the hole, and it threaded in just fine. And you can see how those threads are tapered instead of straight threads. That allows it to seal because it is tapered. So once we get the right plug, that should seal up just fine. We'll put a little bit of pipe compound on it when we screw it in, and that should stop our leak. Okay, back to the starter. We have our main battery cable coming in here. It comes around and it connects right to the starter here. And this tractor is a 6-volt positive ground. So the wire that comes to the starter is actually the negative pole of the battery. The positive pole gets connected to a hole right inside the battery box. It's just a real short connection, real short braided cable. Your negative is the one that runs all the way up here, and it's a 7-foot cable if you go buy a new one. Now, just for purposes of spinning the tractor over, we're going to use a battery we already got sitting out here, a big marine battery. So I just bought this cable to go from the battery to the starter, and then we'll get a ground cable that we can run from the positive just to a bolt somewhere here on the chassis. Okay, we pulled the old negative cable out of here, and there's another cable that's attached to the same pole that supplies juice the rest of the way every place it needs to go. So you leave that on for, obviously, and then we've got our new cable connected here. So we'll figure out a positive ground cable. Okay, I didn't have a cable eye, so I just used a piece of copper pipe for our cable eye, and just smashed it down on the cable, drilled a hole in it just temporarily. Okay, we've got our positive ground hooked up. I just connected it to a bolt here temporarily on the fender. So the test light should show we have power here. So if we touch this to somewhere on the body, we're going to check our connection. We still have power. So we're all the way through the body. We have a good connection. So when we're ready, we'll connect the negative lead that comes from the starter to this connection here. But that's how you can check, make sure you've got a good ground to your tractor. Okay, we've got our our negative lead connected to the starter. So we have power to the tractor now. So what I want to do now is I just want to bump the starter. You do it by pulling this lever right here to see if this starter is going to bump and turn the engine over. We're not going to get too carried away because we don't have any fuel. We haven't checked for spark, anything like that. I just want to see if the starter is going to work. And yes, this is a 6-volt starter, and we have a 12-volt battery. It's not going to hurt it. It's going to spin it a little faster than normal, but you don't want to make a habit out of doing this. We're just using it for testing purposes, and when we try to start the tractor, we'll also do it with a 12-volt because it will spin a little bit faster. But we'll eventually get a 6-volt battery to run this. Now, if you have any lights connected, if you were to turn on the light switch or whatever, it's going to immediately burn out all your 6-volt bulbs. So make sure you don't do that. So we'll give this thing a bump. All right, here we go. Cross your fingers, folks. Yes, the starter works. That's great news. So now we get to go a little more in depth. So now what we have to do is we have to free up some linkages. Our choke linkage is stuck. Our throttle linkage is stuck. So we've already squirted some blaster on some of this stuff. So probably we're just going to have to get something on here and just start working these things and getting everything freed up. Okay, we got our throttle freed up. it's moving the throttle lever. So now let's work on our choke. We've got our choke working. It's still a little bit sticky. We can't do it with the handle up there yet because it's still a little stiff, but at least we can do this by hand and we can choke this for initial start. So Farmall has a procedure in the manual for the Cub that you need to run through if your tractor's been sitting a while. It's also got a procedure to do if it's going to sit a while. We're going to do the opposite, of course, because this tractor's been sitting, and we're going to bust the manual out. We'll go through those steps with you. So the manual says if you're going to start an engine that's been sitting for a while, mix 1 part gas with 1 part like 30 weight oil. And then one at a time you'll remove the spark plug, check the spark plug, gap the spark plug, put 2 tablespoons of that gas oil mixture into the cylinder through the spark plug hole. Do that to all 4 before you spin it. And then once you crank it, that's going to help loosen up any stuck rings or anything like that. And you'll spin it without the spark plug in the hole, so it'll blow out any of the excess stuff that's in the cylinder. And then after you check the gaps in the spark plugs, you'll put those back in. Make sure you don't get your wiring order wrong. And then you're ready to try to pop it off. Before we pull plugs out, we want to make sure that we blow out any dirt and debris that's down in the socket, because we don't want that getting down into the cylinder. All right, got some masking tape. I labeled all my wires, so we're going to go back correctly. So we can now remove our wires, pull our plugs, check the gap, get our fluids down in there that we need, and be closer to getting this thing to fire. All right, we got all the spark plugs out. Looking down into the cylinder, the piston's got a little carbon on top, but not terrible. The spark plugs, however, are a little clapped out. Barely anything left on our spark arm here. You can see they're pretty worn down. So we're going to get some new spark plugs. Might as well start with new with these, because these are pretty much junk. But before we leave, we're going to put our solution in these cylinders, give it time to soak real good while we're gone. And then when we get back, we'll blow that out and put our spark plugs back in. So 1 ounce is 2 tablespoons. So we have 4 ounces of our mixture. We did 2 ounces of gas, 2 ounces of oil. So we're going to put 1 ounce in each cylinder, right through our little funnel. Now when we pour our fluid in our 3rd hole here, and they're counted from the front, so this would be number 3, I had some leakage coming out the bottom, which concerned me briefly for a minute, but it's coming out the weep hole in the exhaust manifold. So this cylinder was in the position to where the exhaust valve was open, so that's why we had that leak. So I'm no longer concerned. I thought we had a lot more major problem than that, but everything is fine. So we're going to run to town and get some new spark plugs and probably grab some lunch. We'll be back. Okay, we are back from lunch. So what I need to do is we need to hit the starter and blow all of this fluid out of the cylinders real quick. That ought to do it. We went ahead and just got all of the ignition parts new while we were there, because we're eventually going to replace all that anyway, so we just got it now. That way if we need it today, we have it. So first thing first, we're going to get the spark plugs out. We're going to make sure that they're gapped. I think 23 thousandths is the gap, and then we'll get those put in. So we're going to check the gap on our spark plugs. It's supposed to be 23 thousandths. So if you've got one of these spark plug gapper rings here, it starts at 20 thousandths here, and we need 23 thousandths. So 25 would be that line there. So we'll run it in just below that. So we're starting at 20. So you just twist this a little bit like that, until it gets to 23 thousandths right in the middle of your bar there. So about right there is where you want it. And then that's how you gap your spark plug. So we got all our spark plugs gapped and put in. We've left number 4 out here. Dave's going to hold it to the metal here. We're going to see if we have a spark. So we're going to turn the ignition switch on and hit the starter. We have spark. That's good. So we'll put that plug in there. We put some fuel to this thing. Hopefully it's going to pop. Now that we know we got spark, we need some fuel. So I bought this nipple to go into here. This is not pipe thread. It's got a taper on the end of it, so make sure you get the right one if you do this. And I've got a short piece of hose that we can run to a temporary gas tank. Okay, folks, we have our temporary hose coming from our temporary fuel tank. So we should be ready to go with fuel in the carburetor. The good thing is we're not leaking out the bottom or anything, so the float's not stuck. We've got a little drip here that we'll have to address, but it's probably just a something to tighten up. We have a complete rebuild kit for that carb. So I'm going to choke this while Dave hits the starter, and we're going to see if we can get this thing to pop. So here we go, folks. We're going to give this thing a shot. Hit it. Pull on that lever over there. Ooh, sounded good. One more. Woohoo! Let's go all the way off. You don't have a throttle hooked yet. It even idles. Yay!
That's better than I was thinking was going to happen.
Yes! Got a little blow by. Not too bad.
Where's the grip plate?
Yeah, it's fucking air now. It's fucking fuel. That's awesome. Give me some throttle, Dave. That one right there in the middle. Got a little smoke. Hit it again. Again. All right. That's awesome. All right, get the ignition switch. Yes!
Perfect.
How about that? That is awesome. Now, you saw some smoke. An engine that hadn't run for a while is going to smoke a little bit because those rings need to heat up and expand and all that. I didn't want to run it too long because the radiator's empty right now. So what we might do is I'll fill that radiator back up. I have some antifreeze I can put in it. And I have the plug. We picked up the plug while we were in town so we can plug that up and hold liquid in it. And we'll let this thing run for a while and see if the smoking stops and all that, because I want to let this thing run and see what it's going to do. We're going to heat it up. Okay, we've got the radiator full, no leaks. They actually gave us the wrong plug. They gave us a quarter plug instead of a 3/8, so I got to trade that in, but we monkey rigged a plug and a valve and a cap and all kinds of crazy stuff down there. But we do have it closed off. So once we get it running, we're going to let it burp this radiator out because there's probably some air in the block. We're going to come back here real quick, check our oil pressure gauge, make sure we got good oil pressure. But I want to let this run for a while to get heated up, expand the ring, see if our smoking subsides. And we also want to heat it up so we pressurize the coolant system so we can see if we got any weak spots in that. Eventually I need to put new hoses, of course, but we're going to run this thing for a while. Here in case we need choke and then hitter. Little throttle. About quarter throttle. It's already left smoke. Let it run. Got plenty of oil pressure. Beautiful. Okay, we've been running for about 15 minutes. You can see the smoke has subsided. So those rings have expanded out and seated in. The motor's nice and warm. You feel the top radiator hose, it's nice and hot. The thermostat is open. There's no water leaks. There's no oil leaks. We have really got a gem here. I'm so excited. It throttles up and runs smooth as glass. So we're gonna shut this baby down. I cannot tell you how happy I am. Well, folks, we saw what we wanted to see. This thing is running. It's a runner. So now we can move forward. We can clean this all up, get things painted, get things put on here that need to put on, change any seals that we need to change. And once we get the paint and get this thing back together, we'll be done. Of course, we'll bring you along the way, but I can't tell you how happy I am that this thing is a runner and we don't have to split this thing apart and do ring jobs and all that. I don't even have to rebuild a carburetor. That is just insane. So, super happy. All right, we had Dave's help today. Really appreciated having him. It was a fun time. Did you have a good time?
I had a great time.
That was good. That's what we're all about. So happy we got this thing running. It really made my day, didn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us here on the farm.
Thanks for watching.